This is Matt Rosen, and this is the Grit Mindset with me, your host, Matt Rosen. The mission of the Grit Mindset is to inspire and empower our listeners by delving deep into the journeys of those who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Through authentic conversations, we uncover the mindsets, strategies, and lessons that have propelled these individuals to overcome adversity and achieve success. My aim is to provide actionable insights and real-world advice to help our listeners cultivate their own grit and navigate their personal and professional lives with confidence and resilience. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Grit Mindset with Matt Rosen. I'm your host. I'm going to be going solo today, as I realized we recorded the first 20 episodes of the Grit Mindset. This one's number 21. And I thought today I'd talk a little bit about why I was inspired to start the Grit Mindset, maybe share a little bit about myself, because as I realized, I've been able to tell the stories of 20 awesome guests who are dear friends of mine, but I realized that I've failed to introduce myself or what even inspired me to start this podcast. So I thought at first I'd give just a little bit of my background. So I'm originally from Miami. My folks had 4 kids, so I'm the oldest of 4. Had to grow up with 2 brothers and a sister who I'm still very close with today. I'm married. I have 2 lovely daughters that are 14 and 11, Taylor and Peyton. My wife Stephanie is a doctor, and it's been a very interesting journey. I started out life in Miami, Florida. You know, my dad became a lawyer for the Army, took us on an adventure through Germany, through Northern Virginia, Southern Virginia, Kansas, back to Northern Virginia, and then to Texas, where ultimately became my home. You know, I attended Texas A&M, and throughout my early life, I had always wanted to be a doctor. In my family, everybody was either doctors or lawyers, and I knew I didn't want to spend time in a library learning the law. That's what my dad loves to do. That's what my brother and sister did as well. So 3 of the 6 folks in my family are actually lawyers, but that was not the path for me, so doctor it was. So what I didn't realize growing up, though, is I was really more of an entrepreneur. Starting at 10, I started mowing lawns. I had a babysitting service. When I was 13, I delivered the Washington Post. That was the very first job I had. And every morning I had about 60 papers dropped off at my house. I would have to rubber band them, deliver them by foot around my neighborhood. I can still throw a paper and hit a doorstep from 60 feet away. Those that were really nice to me and tipped me, I would gently put their paper inside their door frame. But for folks like Brett Rosenzweig and his dad, I would literally throw the paper wherever it landed. And sometimes they'd see their paper and sometimes they didn't. But from a very young age, if I wanted a new pair of shoes or if I wanted to get some new clothes, eventually wanted to buy a car, I had to do different odd jobs. And so I did. The Washington Post was really the only job you could work before you were 15. I think you had to be 15 or 16 in Northern Virginia to work. So the Washington Post was my gig until I unfortunately fell, broke my ankle. My parents had to deliver the paper for a couple months. And after that, I got busy with school and decided not to retake the post at the Washington Post. But it was a great learning experience. Had to run all the math, deliver all the papers. Then I'd have to go and collect all the money from a receivable standpoint, and then report back to the distributor, pay for all my papers. And, you know, at the end of the month, maybe I collected $250, but I definitely put in a lot more work than $250. I think if you average it out, I was probably making about $2 an hour. But that was really my first lesson in venture from an entrepreneurial standpoint. From there, I went on to do a lot of odd jobs. I lifeguarded. I taught swim instructions. I worked at a water park. When I got to college, I did everything from being a short order cook to driving delivery. Had the fun of being a bouncer at a country bar called Hurricane Harry. Still good friends with a lot of the folks I worked with there. Tended bar, and actually, had the privilege. Well, I wouldn't say the privilege, the fun of owning a bar on Lower Greenville in Dallas, which was an utter failure. But it was through all these experiences that I really decided on a career path, which is I did not want to work with my back. I wanted to work with my mind. And so, you know, I was fortunate to be educated at Texas A&M University. I had a degree in biomedical science. As I was following the path to be a doctor, you know, I applied to medical schools and, you know, after being rejected, realized that medical school was probably not the path I was going to take and that I was going to have to find another path. And so when that happened, I actually got the only job I could, which was selling. I actually sold printing for the Standard Register Company. And for those that don't remember the late 90s or didn't grow up in that era, everything was going digital. Y2K was the big thing. And so everybody was investing in software platforms. No one was investing in printed business forms. And that's what I was selling. And I was going out and meeting with folks and asked them, could we print forms for information in their organization, only to find out, hey, they're going to JD Edwards, or they're going to SAP, or they're going to Oracle. And during my studies, at Texas A&M, I was so focused on medicine in medical school, I kind of missed this entire computer revolution that was going on. Now, I'd had a Commodore 64 and an Atari and a Nintendo and coded when I was in, junior high and high school, but I'd completely left that behind to pursue a career in medicine. And so what I realized getting my start in the professional world, that I was going to actually have to go back to some of the roots and some of the things I enjoyed. And that was, getting back up to speed on computers. And so I went from selling paper and paper accessories to working for a telecommunications company, to then getting my first shot in an e-commerce consulting firm. And this was around the dawn of the internet. Everybody was implementing websites. .com was all the rage. E-business was huge. And so that's where I had my first opportunity. A good friend and mentor named Sean Paquette hired me to be part of that firm and got my start as an inside sales representative. So that's where I really learned some of my first grit in the professional world. So every morning I woke up, made about 100 phone calls to try and set appointments with executives to talk to them about what were they doing with the internet, what were they doing with e-business, what were they doing about this .com boom that was all around us. And so that's where I got my start in consulting. And so during that time, I turned to mentors and books to learn. And so during that time, I had the privilege of being handed a copy of this. This is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And that's really what inspired this show, The Grit Mindset. So in this book, Napoleon Hill, he's a reporter, and he meets Andrew Carnegie, who sends him on this mission for over 20 years. He goes and interviews the greats of his time. Think, Rockefeller and Ford, and obviously Carnegie himself, and many, many successful people that have all long since passed. And so what Napoleon Hill came up with is really this methodology for success, where, he doesn't ever call it out, but I will here on this show. If you write something down and repeat it to yourself repeatedly about what you want to achieve, whether it's a goal in life or an amount of money you want to make, what you want to start, really the difference you want to make on society, how you want to help your community, if you are thoughtful enough to write it down, because about 90% of people don't actually write any goals down. So just by writing something down, you're ahead of the game. Napoleon Hill found that if you wrote it down and reviewed it, call it twice a day, anyone could achieve great things, because their mind would become aligned with achieving that goal, and people around them would become inspired to help them. And so that was really the secret that he shared in this book. And as I went through my entrepreneurial journey, I turned to this book many times and read many passages from it, which I won't bore you with on the podcast today, but I do encourage you to read the book. And what I've tried to do with the Grit Mindset, it was really Jeff Crilly, whose studio I'm at today. He planted the seed in my head to start a show about grit. And we'll get to the later part of my professional journey here in a moment. But there's, as I was looking for inspiration from those that had been before me, when I read Napoleon Hill's book, it spoke to me. But the people that he interviewed, were very famous. When you actually go to the news or read different magazines, you see people like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, all successful geniuses. But there's only a few of those that become multi-billionaires. And for many folks that are sitting there and don't know anybody like that, it can be very hard to bridge from how am I going to go from someone who's starting their first job or still in school or maybe underemployed or looking for their next opportunity, when all you look at is examples of the greats. And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people out there like myself and many of the people I've had on the show that have come from humble beginnings and through grit and determination have been able to make something better of themselves. And you don't have to start the next Microsoft or OpenAI or Facebook to be a success. There's many untold heroes and entrepreneurs out there in the world today. And really what the grit mindset is all about is getting their stories out there, sharing their stories, understanding what makes them tick. And that's what inspired me to start this show, is to give access to all those stories. I've been blessed to be part of Young Presidents Organization, which is an incredible organization of entrepreneurs and operators of companies. and had a great chance to learn from many folks in that organization what's possible. I've also been part of an organization called Collective 54, which is for professional services companies. And that also has been a great experience, as being surrounded by other founder entrepreneurs who are starting their own services firms and learning from them and what they have to offer. I've also been part of Birthing at Giants, which is a program that Lewis Schiff puts on in Boston. And so I've been super fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of really intelligent people. And I almost forgot the DFW IT Roundtable, which I co-founded with Sean back in 2004. Had many of the members of that on this show early on, as well as Biz Owner Ed, which was an entrepreneurship program. So I've been very blessed to be in Dallas, Texas, where there's a strong entrepreneurial culture and spirit. And not everybody lives in a place like this with access to those types of folks. So that's what the grit mindset is all about, is it's sharing the stories of those who have been successful, who have faced difficult times and adversity, and been able to really rise up and drive through those to, create, great success for themselves, for their families, for their children, for their communities. And now I'll kind of turn to the rest of the story. So as I mentioned, I got my start in a consulting firm at the start of 2000. And for about 18 months, it was incredible fun. But unfortunately, in 2001, the tech bubble burst, America went to war, and my consulting firm of 500 people dwindled down to about 100 people. In fact, we went from being owned by a private equity firm to being owned by a bank, and all the great people quit or were fired, and the firm got reduced from what was a really great firm and culture to literally nothing. And so I left that firm. I spent about 4 years working for an entrepreneur who I was selling technology to sales executives, customer relationship management. When I had worked at that printing company, I'd been handed a book of business, and it was just a file cabinet with stapled business cards. And I went through that file. I called up every customer only to find out that we've been fired, had errors, lots of different things. They didn't answer the phone at all. I had literally no history on what had happened with those customers. When I started my next job, I was handed a copy of ACT, and I knew exactly what was happening. And so I kind of fell in love with this whole concept around Salesforce automation or customer relationship management. And even to today, taking care of customers is really key to me and what we do as a business. And so for 4 years, I actually sold customer relationship management technology to organizations, where I was selling to sales and marketing and service organizations, really a one-stop place to put all the customer information. And so that was a great experience for a while. In 2007, I was inspired by John Humphrey, who's one of my early guests. He's amazing. He's actually starting like his third company, and he's in his 60s. That's another fallacy, is that you have to be 20 to 35 to start a company. And that's what a lot of these magazines and shows glamorize, when it turns out that most successful entrepreneurs start their businesses somewhere between 40 and 60. And that's not a very well-known fact, but hopefully something that can inspire listeners that might feel like their opportunities passed to start something new. Anyway, John was starting a firm that was all about people growth called Paraveda, and I had the opportunity to join him early days in that firm and build it from about a $10 million firm to about a $100 million firm. And I learned a lot of tough lessons along the way there. Up until then, I had always been a salesperson, someone who would meet with clients, understand their needs, and then bring in a really smart technical team to solve the problems, and I'd go away and find the next. Well, at that firm, I had to oversee every project that I sold. And I very quickly learned that delivering complex projects is a lot harder than selling them. And so during my time there, I lost a lot of hair. I had a full head when I started, and it was all blonde, not so much anymore. And so at that firm, I really got to cut my teeth and learn a lot from different mentors I had, and really learn what it meant to run a consulting firm, deliver difficult consulting projects. And it was at that time I was, really inspired to want to start my own thing, and had the opportunity to do that in 2016, which is Aleda, which is the firm that's on my shirt today. I was at Paraveda for 7 years, had some great experiences, made some great friends. I got to give a shout out to Hector Martinez if he's listening. One of the best things he ever did for me was put me on a performance improvement plan after I had a rough year. And it took a lot of grit and resilience, but I never forget sitting down and asking him, did he want me on the team, or was he putting me on a PIP to show me a nice way out? And he actually had to go think about it. He's told me to stop telling that story, so maybe this will be the last time it's here on this show. So Hector, if you're listening,
this one's for you. But it inspired me to really, really dig deep and do a better job than I had been doing. I've been kind of, doing it a little bit half-assed, wasn't really that into my work. And, when I was kind of, shown the option of the door or getting my butt in gear, I got my butt in gear and ended up having a very successful last couple years there. And it was really something that inspired a lot of grit in me. And sometimes, when I see great people that maybe need a little kick in the pants, I'll put them on a plan and they'll either rise to the occasion or see themselves out. And it's something I believe in versus showing someone the door without giving them a real chance. From there, I had the opportunity to join a firm where I was selling a software package. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this story. It's one I could actually spend an entire episode on and probably will with a guest. But for about 8 months, it was the most fun I ever had taking a software product to market. But then I realized I was working for a bad actor. And unfortunately, I had to depart that organization. But luckily, I was able to do so with a charter client, the Freeman Companies. Many thanks to Joe Popolo, Richard Moranville, Michelle Johnson, Trish Webb. They gave me my first chance when I started Aleda. The concept of the firm when I started it was really to build a team of strong individuals that could stand strong alone, but are better as part of a highly networked team, which is what we are. And so I picked people that had been some of the best and brightest I'd worked with in the consulting business. And then I also was able to have a number of clients that had bought technology projects from us come to work with us. And so if you were to look at the leadership page, it's either half career consultants that share the same values I do or clients that bought from us and share those values as well. So it's a great eclectic mix of people that gets along really well. And what we're in the business of doing is delivering complex solutions for organizations, from the strategy to the product design to the custom development to the data to now we're embarking into the field of AI. And it's been an incredible journey. It started as myself and one developer. I was working out of a small room attached to my garage in 2016 and grew the organization into 350 people operating on 4 continents with clients on 5. And it took a lot of grit and determination to get through that. It was very tough starting out. I was very fortunate to have a great client that believed in us, but I knew that client wouldn't last forever, and they didn't. And so I had to very quickly pivot from client to client. And I started the firm with a very simple mantra, which was family first, clients are king. We take great care of our people. And I tell everyone, well, it sounds like motherhood and apple pie. Those are not just words we put on a wall. Those are words we believe in. And we know that without great people that are given a path to growth and without great clients that we deliver for, we don't have a firm. And ultimately, by building great people, by taking care of our clients, we can take care of our families, which really that's why we're doing this at the end of the day. At least most people are. So I would be remiss if I got through this episode of the Grit Mindset without calling out some of the folks that helped me get here. Obviously, my wife, Stephanie Pickle, who hopefully will listen to this episode of the Grit Mindset. She's a medical doctor. Actually, when I was up until I met her, I questioned whether I made the right choice, whether going down the entrepreneurial choice was the right thing, or whether I should have given medical school one more try. And after meeting her during her residency at Parkland, I realized I would have made an absolutely terrible doctor, even though I'd volunteered at hospitals and even though I had worked in some clinics. I realized after watching the amount of grit and determination it takes to get through both medical school and then a residency program and then work in a private practice, that was not the path for me. Not that I'm afraid of hard work, but the amount of empathy for patients, the amount of administration that doctors have to deal with, I realized that was not a field I would have excelled in. So I think med school did me a favor by rejecting me, and I'm glad it worked out the way it did. But it was because she had a private practice, was doing well. We were able to take the risk to start Aleda. In fact, part of the reason I left the previous job was because I was on the road nonstop. I wasn't there as much as I wanted to be for my family. And so part of the vision of starting Aleda, that family first, was something that she and I had come up with, if nothing else, to keep me in check and keep me building a firm where I could depend on others to do a lot of the travel so that I could be there for my 2 young girls as they were growing up. So that was an important part of starting the firm with that family first mantra, was to be there for them. And I couldn't have done that without the support of my wife. So back to a little bit of the Aleda story. So, we were faced with a lot of challenges early on. I had a former employer who, had some issues with me. I also had a project manager who tried to steal one of my very first projects out from under me. Felt like the first 6 months we were constantly under fire. We were working on a huge project for the Freeman companies. I felt like every firm in town was kind of gunning for me and for the firm. But we were able to persevere through that time. We were able to land 10 clients in our second year of business. We were able to bring on a lot of really strong people. The firm wouldn't be where it is without people like Phil Leary and David Romeo and David Brown and Trish Webb and Eric Jensen, Manish LeMay. And I know I'm forgetting a number of folks, but those were some of the key leaders early on that helped turn the firm into the success that it is today. And it took a lot of grit and determination to attract those folks and provide a place that they wanted to be. I also forgot to mention Justin Shannon, Mary Kirk. Those are some great people early on, Laura Hagan. And so hopefully if you're listening, shout out John Salvi. Couldn't have done it without them. And I think that's one of the most important things to recognize is, you can have grit, resilience, determination, but you can't go it alone. It's important to have a team. It's important to invest in that team, pour into that team, support that team, and recognize that, you don't have all the answers. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You can rely on a team. And if you inspire that team and take care of them, they'll take care of you, the business, your customers. And I've been very fortunate to have built a team around me that, has been able to build the type of company that I'd always dreamed of. And so it took, 40 years, and a number of failed businesses. I started early on in my career. It was in the IT consulting business, and that firm that fell apart. I actually tried to start a nightclub on the side, actually a daiquiri bar called Dirty Dave's. It was a complete and utter failure. And so my really first true business entrepreneurial experience was a disaster. We were out of money before we even opened our doors, and we were closed down less than a year later. We made so many mistakes. And I would probably shout out to guys like Shane Spillers, who I had on the show. I would never go into the bar or nightclub or restaurant business again. It's very, very difficult to be successful. And that guy shows a lot of grit and determination, which was why I was glad to have him on a few episodes ago. But whatever field you choose, it has to be something you believe in. And I'm going to go back to this Napoleon Hill book because it's, again, why I started the show. I think a lot of it comes down to finding something you're passionate about, understanding your why, and then writing it down and say it every day to yourself. And it doesn't seem right, then it's probably not. And you need to come up with something else. For me, I knew I wanted to run my own thing. I didn't know what shape or form it was going to come in. I went through a number of failures, from not getting into medical school to having a bar failed, to having multiple companies I work at failed, to having my real to be at a firm I loved to almost be kicked out of, to then do an entrepreneurial experience, to work for the wrong person, ultimately to start my own firm, which I've now been at for 9 years. And I feel very blessed to have had the team I've had along the way, to be part of the organizations I'm part of. And I feel like part of the grit mindset is really giving back from these experiences, not only my own, but those that I've come to call my friends and associates, to share their stories with the audience and hopefully inspire some of the folks that are out there listening to take a first step to achieve something greater. Because beginning the entrepreneurial journey really just starts with the first step. And oftentimes it won't be your friends and family that'll encourage you. It'll be other entrepreneurs. Most people are risk averse, as I've found. And I think when I reached out and told my own family I was going to start my own business, heck, when I told them I wasn't going to medical school and I was going to go into sales, they thought I was crazy. And it wasn't until many years down the road that they understood why I made the choices that I did. So don't always depend on your close family and friends. Get out there, meet other. If you have a dream of being an entrepreneur or starting your own thing, go surround yourself with those that have done it. There's many of us out there, and they're not that hard to find. And many of them are being featured on the show. I think also writing down a purpose and mission is key. And then share that with other entrepreneurs. Really having that support group is what allowed me to get from just being a sales guy to being the CEO of a firm. Having that DFW IT roundtable was really a group. It was an idea that was planted in my head by someone I worked for. Of having this mastermind group of people around you that you could learn from, they could learn from you. show up expecting to give before you expect to get. And that group's now been going for 21 years, and most of the members, the original members, have come on the show to date, and they've had great successful stories. And I don't think any of us would be where we are without one another. So I think those are really the takeaways: is have a goal and a purpose, write it down, review it daily, surround yourself with those that have been more successful than you. I still have a number of folks I look up to, and I know I can call them, and they've dealt with any problem I've run into 10 times and then some. And so having folks you can call upon to help you through tough times, and then just believe in yourself and know that the path is not always going to be a straight one, that there's going to be a lot of bumps and bruises and left turns and pivots along the way. But if you're truly dedicated, you can achieve anything you want to. And that's what this book and this show is all about, is hopefully inspiring folks to get somewhere where they aren't today, to take that first step, to begin their journey. And hopefully this show and some of the messages and stories that we share will inspire those to do more. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode of The Grit Mindset. Stay gritty out there.